Let's just face it. Either you're part of the game and they suck. So I woke up one morning and I walked into the kitchen where my wife was and said, I'm going to quit my job where I'm making a lot of money and have a lot of, financial security and safety. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I feel led to do something different. And that was the day that the Sales Rebellion was born without me even really knowing it. And for 6 years now, I've been defying all logic, the sales world and the way that it typically operates. I mean, just basically fighting back against the status quo to build better outcomes for people, more joy in their sales walk, more creativity, more excellence, more excitement, more fun.
For me, sales is something I do for people, not to them. And I love service. It juices me when I can see that I've helped someone go to the next level. I'm with you with the rebellion and actually to really educate and empower individuals to understand that selling can be joyful. I like how you called it the sales walk. There's a lot of salespeople out there. There's a lot of companies that are struggling to scale. What were those light bulbs that went off for you at those different stages? Because it wasn't the same light bulb either.
I'll start with the first light bulb. The first light bulb was...
And now the man you've been waiting for, John, the sales machine, Rankins!
Ladies and gentlemen, get excited. Today's guest is a guy that I call a sales rebel from Wonderland. He literally creates wonderful experiences for companies to break the ice. And not only that, he leads a sales rebellion. Today's guest is Dale Dupree, aka the Copier Warrior. Dale leads the Sales Rebellion, a movement that's all about putting people over products and community over commissions. He'll be talking about the sales best practices and how you can level up your sales game. Dale is all about not just creating experiences, but making a difference in people's lives and organizations. Let's welcome him to the show. How you doing, Dale?
Thanks for having me, John.
Hey, man, tell me about your journey in sales and how did you become the Copier Warrior and now you're leading a rebellion?
Yeah, sure. I'd be my honor. I've got a kind of a non-traditional start to sales, but it begins back with the story of my father. He was an athlete, headed to the NFL, was scouted in high school by all the major universities, Alabama, UF, Auburn, UT, you name it. And he basically got injured. It's a long story, but he got injured through a surgery that put him down to one college, Carson Newman Bible College. Which most people probably never heard of. It's called Carson Newman University now. But he went up there in 1974, 72. Yeah, he was going to graduate, get drafted still. He had the whole game plan, and then he broke his neck. Doctors told him, hey, man, we don't even know how you're walking right now. This is crazy. And so my dad basically, with that information decided, well, it's probably a blessing and a miracle that I'm alive right now. So I'm just gonna go with the flow and trust and see what happens. So he left school, drove a good solid 600 miles from East Tennessee back to the state of Florida in Orlando, where he was born and raised. Walked into a couple spots with his resume and got hired at a company selling paper. So my dad was like the original Dwight Schrute, if you will, from The Office. Now, I tell you a fable here, but this is a true story. I'd spin this a little bit, but this is a true story. Within about a week, my dad had sold so much paper that this place was flabbergasted. They thought that he was stealing it, or buying it himself, or they were trying to figure out how he was selling so much. But truth was, he was really good at sales. And ultimately, what happened was he ended up graduating from paper to copy machines. Now, back in his day, there was 2 copy machines in segment. So you had a color and a black and white. And then in those segments, you had 2 different options that you could choose from. You could choose from a 70 page per minute machine or a 60 page per minute machine. And that was it. The kind of people that bought copy machines back in the 70s were big mortgage houses or massive banks or attorneys that had tons of cases. You didn't just buy a copy machine because they were, in those days, somewhere in the ballpark of about $30,000 to $40,000 for an entry level unit. where now you can go to Staples and buy them for $199, right? And they kind of do the same thing, not quite, right? But I digress. The point being that it wasn't a really easy sale. My father basically skyrocketed inside of that organization to the point of being the number one sales rep, not just for the company, but in the region. He was recognized by Xerox, and did training with them, all kinds of crazy stuff, and then opened up his own business in 1984, which is where my story technically begins, because I was born a year later with toner running through my literal veins. And even though I tried to stay away from the family business, my father always seemed to make it such an enjoyable place that deep in my soul, I knew I'd be back at some point. From wandering the halls as a child, it was a very mysterious, very adventurous place as a kid, hiding in a sea of copy machines and making pretend that they were robots, trying to take over the world was the way that I grew up on the industry. About 16 years old, I was playing music. I was homeschooled. I was very talented at sports. I was getting a bunch of scholarships and offers to go to college. And at the same time in my music career, I was being tempted by a record label to basically just kind of finish high school and start a career in the music industry, which is what I did. So at 17 years old, I graduated from my homeschooling education, and I took it to the road. Literally, I did my first tour, 52 days on the road straight. And by the time we got home, and there's lots of stories in that first tour, but by the time we got home, we had 17 record label offers on the table. And from there, we ended up on Warner Brothers. I had a really fun music career. It was about 6-7 years long in total. In the midst of that, though, there was a gentleman in my band, one of my best friends, who got addicted to heroin, and we nipped that in the butt pretty quick. And I said, hey, I'm going to help you. I'm going to be here for you. And also, we're not going to do the band anymore. We're going to pause on that. We'll take a break here. And so in the process of doing that, I needed income, and I begged my dad, basically the prodigal son. He's back, no college degree, not really sure what else I was going to do with my life. And my father said, dude, it's all good. You can come work for me, but you can only choose from one of two jobs. You can clean the toilets or you can sell. And so here's my perspective of sales, right? Which one's better? And are they the same? And, obviously I took sales over the toilet cleaning, but for the first couple of years, I sucked at it. My father was very gracious in year one, where basically I was at 30% of the quota. My dad said, hey, I give everybody one more try. So I'm going to give you one too. And then in my second year, I got much closer, 77, 80% of quota, much closer to the quota itself. My dad said, that's good progress. Do you want to keep doing this? That's what he asked me. And I remember being very tempted to stop. But I also remembered deep down inside feeling change and ultimately feeling a calling to stick around. So I did. And for the next 11 years, I became not just at my father's company, the number one sales rep, but he was acquired within the next 2 years of that journey. And I took that company by storm, 8 million to 25 million in revenue in about 4.5 years, just at 5 years, became their VP of sales, helped them grow in market segments, some of the most difficult for selling copy machines in general in the United States. But it was a lot of fun. I had a blast doing it. I ended up in corporate, working for Xerox for about 2 years, realized that corporations just suck. Let's just face it. Either you're part of the game and they suck, or you're not part of the game and they suck. It doesn't really matter which side you're on, they suck. So I woke up one morning and walked into the kitchen where my wife was and said, I'm going to quit my job where I'm making a lot of money and have a lot of, financial security and safety. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I feel led to do something different. And that was the day that the Sales Rebellion was born, without me even really knowing it. And for 6 years now, I've been defying all logic from the sales world and the way that it typically operates. I mean, just basically fighting back against the status quo to build better outcomes for people, more joy in their sales walk, more creativity, more excellence, more excitement, more fun. And it's been a blast. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, let's do it. And I like the sales walk aspect of it because I love sales. For me, sales is something I do for people, not to them. And I love service. I really love it. Juices me when I can see that I've helped someone go to the next level, whether it be an individual or an organization. And I created a framework called Next Level Sales. And that's exactly what we do. So, I'm with you with the rebellion, and actually to really educate and empower individuals to understand that selling can be joyful. And I like how you called it the sales walk. But let's rewind a little bit because I love your journey. And yeah, amen to your dad, right? Sticking with you because, I always wanted to be that guy on the front lines. I remember my first job and I applied at a restaurant when I was 15 years old, right? And I wanted to be the busboy because that's the guy who sells, right? He brings out the salads and he gets a lot of tips. But I had really bad acne, and they're like, "You got the toilets and dishwashing." So I wanted to be out there, but they restricted me. That made me want to be out there even more, right? But I learned a lot during that experience. And while I was back there in the kitchen, the cooks in those days, they were always back in the break room smoking in between orders, right? But they would like to have their smoke breaks. So anyway, I would finish the dishes quickly and I would go up and I would say, "Hey, teach me how to cook." I learned to cook everything, right? And long story short, they got in a fight with the manager one night, and then the manager was screwed. And I said, "Guess what? I can cook everything." Anyway, I got promoted and got a raise because I sold myself, right? Learning new skill sets. So I want to relate that because it's an experience of me selling myself to up my game and to make more money. What was the moment that the light switched for you, Dale? Because you don't go from 33% of quota to 77%. And then you
Yes.
don't go from 77% to obliterating records, taking a company from $8 to $25 million, right? So I want you to talk, because there's a lot of salespeople out there. There's a lot of companies that are struggling to scale. What were those light bulbs that went off for you at those different stages? Because it wasn't the same light bulb either. I guarantee it, right?
Well said. Well put. Great question, too. I'll start with the first light bulb. The first light bulb was a mentor of mine and my father. Both had this very similar saying, which boiled down to nobody cares as much as you. And so I really detached from the outcome, but ultimately I stopped worrying about whether or not other people cared as much as me. And I took, like my dad used to say, where he would say, "Hey, nobody cares as much as you." And then he would wait a couple seconds and he would say, "Except for me." And he would say, and unless you have that same attitude where that second portion doesn't mean anything from the respect in regards to reciprocity or an expectation. He said, "I care because I genuinely want to see you win. And I don't really give a shit if you reciprocate around that, or if you tell me that, hey, thanks for believing in me. Doesn't matter to me. I'm here to serve." Ultimately, my father was the greatest example of a servant leader that I ever met in my lifetime. And it's not to say that I'm not trying to find a better one, but I just really honestly haven't come across somebody with his legend since his passing in 2016. Yeah. So the first light bulb was that, where I said, okay, I can get behind that. I can get behind this idea that you don't need to go in expecting people to care. I need to show them just how much I do care, which would go great with your story of you selling yourself / putting in that extra work ethic, planning, wanting to grow, looking ahead instead of in the moment, building for that next thing, right, is really one of the first light bulbs for me, without a doubt. The second was when I walked in, and on the way out was a sales guy that I was like, I wonder if that's a salesperson. And when I walked in, the ladies, I said, I sell coffee machines, or I had the pitch we all give, which I didn't realize at the time. I just thought it was like part of my spiel. And she goes, "Oh my God, how did you time that?" I said, "Time what?" She goes, "The guy that was just in here sold copiers. You people are like roaches. You're everywhere." And I'll never forget what she said. I wasn't offended by it, but a light bulb went off, as you were just asking, where I said, this is why people don't give me the time of day. This is why no one cares. Because what's the difference between me and the guy that just walked in here? We both have a half suit on, right? We both have this site seller in our hands. What's the difference? And that really, it took me to another level where I started doing some pretty wild stuff. I know this is a podcast, so I won't show any of it, but I developed some pretty unique activities for myself. One of them, which was my favorite, was that I had these little bricks and they said on the side of them for copier repairs. And I had an instruction manual that I would take with the bricks. And so this person at the front desk would have never seen me before. I dressed a little bit different. I used to have a hat that said Copier Warrior across the top of it. I'd walk right in with a hat on right in the middle of a B2B environment, if you will. And this is back in 2009, 2010. So it was a real no-no back then. But I digress. I'd walk in with this brick and say, hey, I just had a couple gifts. I'd have a couple of them for the folks that interact with the copy machines the most. And I'd just kind of like be passing these to people, and they'd be taking them and looking at them and going, this is funny. Who are you? And I'd say, you guys don't care who I am. That doesn't matter. Where's the copier? Are we going to go throw these things at them? Like, what's the deal? And I made some of the greatest relationships of my life starting right there in those moments. I had about more in the ballpark of about 50, 60 total plays along those lines where I basically took people experiences, highly creative experiences that were tailored and talked directly to problems that we fixed, issues specifically to that end user's environment that they would probably be suffering from. And ultimately, I created what I like to call a sense of wonder in people, or instead of looking at me as like a B2B process or a business process at all, they looked at me as a connector, an impactor, a fixer, and somebody that essentially like got it on their level that they could go to, ask questions, be open, be honest, be genuine, and they would get integrity back from me. So because of that, I have the same stories as most salespeople. They start in a different place where my 5 minutes inside of a building were much different than everybody else's. So I was being invited right into the boardroom, right into the CEO's office. And then I had to, continue to practice this identity though of creativity, giving experiences, creating that wonder, and also integrity. Because when somebody does something like hands you a lease agreement with all the details of their current equipment, you could look at that like a couple different ways. One could be like, oh, I have all the details now. I know like what I would need to do to beat this sale. But another way to look at it would be, well, I'm really grateful to you for showing me all this, but why do you show me what's going on? And, at the end of the day, when people would say things like, we don't have any problems, but we definitely like have never been cold called by someone like you before. So we're interested to see what you could do. I would typically lead that entire sales process with recommending they stay where they were. And I think that was a huge component to my success overall because I built a lot of great relationships. There were times when it still would turn into a yes, and there was a lot of times when it would stay as a no based on those recommendations, which meant that down the road at some point, I would always be available. And a lot of times that's what happened. I'd get the business. And ultimately, because of that, I learned one of the most important pieces of that light bulb, the long game. It's sales if you try to rush it and become some kind of overnight success inside of your industry, whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, you might make a lot of money, for sure. I could see that happening in a lot of different scenarios with my own playbooks. But what happens 10 years from then, right? I still to this day, 6 years out of the game, and I got a text this morning. Hey, man, I'm pretty sure you're not doing copiers anymore because you got this sales rebellion thing, but I really need help. Could you help me out? And think about that for a second, bro. It means it's 6 years, right? And I'm still this guy that's trusted in places where I've been replaced by lots of other salespeople at this point, especially with a turnover rate of 1.7 years in the industry, and especially like in those territories, right? So, and maybe that speaks for itself, but I think those are some of the most important light bulbs that I had in my walk, really this creative stance, this identity of understanding like what is everybody else? What is the status quo? How to differentiate yourself and not just do it in a way that's like, yeah, I changed the color of my business card or something that's not very impactful. But like one of my favorite moments that I ever had in my life was I was in a big RFP, probably about somewhere in the ballpark of 21 different providers in this conversation. We're all in a public room.
What's an RFP?
It's a request for proposal. And basically it was from a state agency, this one in particular. So like a school board or a local city or government entity, county, whatever the case. And there was a whole lot of people at this meeting asking questions, sounding smart, yada, yada, yada. And I'm just sitting in the corner with like the brightest pink pants on you've ever seen in your life, a hat and a weird shirt that was like super busy with flamingos all over it or something, and everyone's like, look at this weirdo, right? And like, there's two things though that you want to think about here is that number one, like if you're authentically you and you're just doing what you do, then there's nothing disingenuous about a moment like that. And secondly, no one's forgetting you in that room. But furthermore, everybody walks up and like, hands their business card and signs the paper. And I had these business cards made where there was Velcro in the middle and they ripped. And I handed all these people these cards. And on one side it says pre-ripped. And then the other side it has my information, but I'd hand them the pre-ripped part. And they all looked at it and they all ripped it and they all looked at each other, like kind of put it back together and just stared at me for a second. And were like, what's your name? They didn't even look at the other side. Oh, what's your name? Those 4 people are 4 people that, you know, eventually changed my life as well, too, in regards to like the business that I would ultimately do with them down the road, even if I didn't win that particular RFP, which I did, by the way. But, you know, the idea though was that I built relationships with these people and that where all this governing effect and these rules are in place that a lot of people have to abide by when they weren't at those entities anymore. And they could make the decisions without 21 people on the bid. I won it every time. No problem. Right. So I learned the long game. I learned creativity. I learned the servant leadership mindset. I learned the audacity, you know, of the art of sales and how to effectively do that. And now I'm 18. I'll be 19 years in at the end of this year. Right. And I've perfected that side of it, I believe. So.
And it all started when you were visiting your dad's company and you were in a sense of wonder, imagining all of these copiers as robots. And you created your own little wonderland. And then you transferred that into sales. You said some really good things, man, that I can really resonate with. One is what your father said. No one will care as much as you do. And then you turned that into nobody cares later. When I start my sales training, that's the first thing I do, especially with new salespeople. And you said 1.7 years is the average time of a salesperson because sales is the highest turnover occupation in the world because people can't handle it. They take it personally. And when I start sales training, the first thing I do is walk up to the board and I write, nobody cares because Ine, it's not about you. Guess what? Here, I'm going to give you the memo. The first thing you need to do to get great at sales is learn Ine. It's not about you. Nobody cares about you, your product, your service, how long you've been in business. They only care that they have a problem. And you brought a brick to handle that problem. That's genius, right? Talk about breaking the ice. Did anybody ever take you up on it? And like take that brick and smash a copier? Because I could see myself doing that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to run an ad for the sales machine and we're going to obliterate laptops. Do you ever feel like throwing your laptop against the wall because data is just so fragmented and your salespeople are lost? Come on, do it with me. And we're going to crush some laptops. So the nobody cares thing, in actuality, is key. Dale, you know, the light went on for you when you walked in and that lady said, you guys are like cockroaches. You guys, one after the other, after the other, after the other. You check this out, Dale. Here's how I made my first $1 million. Hi, how you doing? I've did door-to-door sales in 7 countries around the world and scaled companies doing direct sales all over the world. And I made my first $1 million building and scaling direct sales teams. And then I got involved with doing corporate sales. So I went to Japan and I was a guest speaker. They paid me as a keynote, right? And they're like, how did you build a sales team? I had over 1,000 salespeople at this time in Indonesia and the Philippines at the time. And I go on stage and literally I start talking about how I built and scaled a sales team. The CEO of Sony or Panasonic, whichever one it was, and Japan's a reserved crowd like Korea. They're very quiet, very respectful. This guy stands up within a minute of me speaking and says, why should I listen to you? You're dressed just like another one of my salespeople, and I don't get it. You know, I run one of the biggest companies. And I said, well, you know what? You probably never will get it. But let me just give you this. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to serve and share with you my experience of how I've built and scaled sales teams. But if the mind's not open, if you're not open, you'll never learn anything from me. You're absolutely right. And I walked off that stage. He sat down. The rest of these 100 CEOs for these biggest companies in Japan stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And Japanese don't do that. And then I continued my talk, and I was sweating bullets, dude. I was sweating bullets. I was never a keynote speaker ever in my life. And I walked off that stage and I said one thing to myself. I get it now at the deepest level in sales. When in service, never nervous, baby. Never again. Never will I ever come from a sense of ego or be intimidated by others. And as long as I serve, I never have to experience that ever again. And I like to share that with you, Dale, because your experience, although different, allowed me to understand sales as a service. Like you said, your mentor was your father. I didn't have a father. So my mentor in sales is Zig Ziglar. Sales is service, solving problems, and making sure they're satisfied. And that's changed the game for me. Totally changed the game. And I like how you said, it's amazing how you said, it's not about making money today. It's about the long game. This is where a lot of salespeople get it wrong because they're just chasing the commissions. It's all about them and not all about the customer. So you said, it was a no in that moment, right? But in actuality, it was just a not right now because you went on to build a successful sales rebellion. And how have you translated that into what you do now with individual salespeople and or organizations?
Yeah, we spent the last 5 years of this company basically training individual salespeople or teams. That's been the model of this organization. Just like a brief overview of that would be that we set up a system. There's 5 components to it. And it begins with the outbound. And basically we teach people, or we're teaching people on that case by case basis, how to get attention in a way that was less of a weak moment or the right time, inside of the sales cycle, which is like 1 out of 1,000 every time. Right. And that's probably a high number, but instead we taught people how to radically educate in a way that caused individuals to say, well, I might not even need this right now, but I'm very curious about this person. I'm very curious about what they've done for me in this moment. I mean, imagine that you get a book and it's got your name on the bottom and you're like, I didn't write a book. And you open it up and there's a bunch of blank pages on the inside. There's a little note that says, hey, the pages of this book are blank because you and I have yet to write this story. And the story on the front's like how John Rankins took his company from X to Y, got rid of Z, Elemental P, won these awards and made all of his employees super happy. Right? Something again that you're trying to achieve with your organization. People almost immediately are intrigued in those moments. A lot of the time the meeting is, I just want to hire you. I just want to start there. I just want to hire you if you're available it's a good laugh. And well, I'm not unless the money's right. What you got, baby? And so you get a fun little bonding moment with somebody and then ultimately you get to show them, your face and ultimately what you stand for. Right. And they get a really good idea of your integrity, of your morals, of your ethics, of your character, of your belief system, because they're a little bit more open. They're a little bit more vulnerable. They're a little bit more compassionate. And because of that, you get a real opportunity not to be a scumbag salesperson. And I think watching that happen to me case by case, where when I would listen to guys in the office go, oh, don't tell them about that. You don't never tell the customer that, and I'd be in these situations and I'd go, well, my guy said not to tell them that. So I'm going to tell them. And I'd say something like, well, hey, I want to just go over the fine print with you real quick. There's escalations on page 7 that'll take you from this number to this number over the course of the next 5 years. And they'd go, y'all do that night. And then I'd go, well, everybody does it. Nobody tells you. And I'm not afraid. So just want to make sure we're on the same page. And, those are the types of things that ultimately won me the most business. It's just this high level engagement around truth. And really that's what the long game is. My best friendships have always been rooted in truth. They've been rooted in areas where even if somebody messes up or fails, that there's forgiveness in that because it's always transparency. over everything else. And I just so believe that the line of sales and business are so convoluted that to me, sales is life and life is sales. And the more that people recognize that motion, the easier it will become and continue to be for them, in a capacity of a job that they enjoy better for them, right? Is the thought process. So it was really simple for me to like fall in love with sales over the time period of these outlooks, these mantras, this existence. And so imagine for 5 years teaching people this. And imagine that like 1 out of 50 sales reps, when you train a company, actually gets it. It's not that you eat yourself up about it.
That's a high number. Like
it is, right? It'd be like 0.02 of 50, right? But it's not that you start to feel like you suck as much as you recognize two things. One, the stuff we teach is extremely hard. The people that have done it have become millionaires in the course of like, let's just say 2 to 3 years of our relationships with them, from making like 100K, 150K to 7 figures. So we've seen the success and we thought to ourselves, well, what if like that book that gets sent out, what if we did it? What if we did it for the entire organization? What if we were in charge? So we've basically become a boutique agency for sales where we do all the outbounding. We do all the creative stuff. We do custom campaigns. We do the stuff that's already in our tutorials. All the things that we teach people to do that they never try because it's too risky. It's too uncomfortable. It's like you said before we started the show, discomfort. People don't look for that. They look for comfort. They try to build for comfort. As a matter of fact, we build for discomfort.
Hey, folks, if you're enjoying this episode and you're picking up what I'm putting down and what the guests are actually putting out there, do me a favor. Like and comment what you liked about the episode, or even comment what would you like to hear? What topics would you like to hear in the future? Because believe me, it matters. I read absolutely every single one of them, and I want to bring you more and more value to help companies scale so that we can grow this podcast to make a bigger difference. Now let's get back to the show.
Like we built to get crazier, right? So we burned the ships at the start of this year, man.
You're crazy, and I'm down with your crazy.
Yeah, we are definitely crazy, man.
Yeah. And, I've taught salespeople for years, and I said, if you really want to be unstoppable, then you really got to be able to get uncomfortable, and at the same time, you got to read the room whenever, you got to be a chameleon. Like you don't walk into a lawyer's office and approach it the same way as a dentist or approach it the same way as a retail store or a restaurant. You really got to be a chameleon. But I love how you consistently build these campaigns, right? Tell us more about these campaigns. So now you're all about the wonder and the icebreaker with the brick, right? To solve the copier problem. And then you're all about the icebreaker of, if you really want to be successful, let's write this story together. And you hand them the book. And what other campaigns have you done that have just blown other organizations' minds that you've done for them, not just for yourself, but for others?
There's a lot. So like, let's say somebody doesn't respond to the book though. There's a bookmark that we send that says for the story yet to be written. And we send it with a little note and just say, hey, just a quick reminder. And also like, here's a placeholder for the pages once we get started. And then we send them a newspaper clipping right behind that. If they don't respond, that's like, let's say you're from Oklahoma. It'll be from the Oklahomian, and it'll be like cut out, look like a newspaper article. And it's all about you and your best-selling book and all the success. And it's probably about that time, really, about the third touch. Sometimes we get to a fourth, sometimes a fifth, but it's somewhere in that range that we typically get a response. But for the typical campaign, we have anywhere between 8 and 12 touches. So we built something I shouldn't say bulletproof because that's a really dumb thing for me to say, right? Because nothing is a silver bullet at the end of the day. Like this stuff at some point will not work the same way as well, too, which is why we are constantly testing new things and trying out new ideas. But we've sent people trophies like hide and seek champion for like the CFO of hide and seek champion, of the world, right? Like that's a good one. Yeah. That one always makes people laugh.
Yeah. I love that. Hey man, I've been trying to get in contact with you for a month. Here's your trophy. You win the hide and seek competition. This is brilliant.
For that one, we exaggerate a lot. We love to exaggerate because it's part of humor and part of wonder is not to lie, but it is to exaggerate. It's to build a world, build it's less of a systematic approach, right? If you think of a fantasy movie like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, or, really like a lot of it is stuff that's unrealistic. It's the thought process, but exaggeration is what really creates wonder. So like imagine in that note, it says, "Dear John," I wish I loved that, by the way, but it says, "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you for 4,167 days now. And I think that makes you the hide and seek champion of the world, or at least of all the CFOs that I'm trying to get in front of right now. So congratulations, here's your trophy." And then imagine like your trophy isn't like this, dude. It's like this. There's a goat on top of it. It's like, the goat of hide and seek. Like, there's just a lot of, there's a lot of stuff. I think the most popular one that we have right now that we're running somewhere. Now this has been used from New Zealand to Mexico to California to Calgary. This one's been used kind of everywhere, even in the UK. It's an empty box. And now we use 4 specific, or actually 5, but so we use an empty donut box, an empty pizza box, an empty Chinese to-go box. And now I've been using empty Happy Meals recently, which is really funny and gets a lot of attention. But we basically write this like really unhinged note, like in the box. So like you open it, there's nothing inside. You're like, what the hell? And there's an art here, right? So sometimes people get grossed out by like a string of cheese, but if you make it look like it's, fake cheese or, whatever it is, but you make it look like it was a pizza in here, some fake grease stains on it, some fake donut O's on it, whatever floats your boat. There's a lot of different ways that we do it. Sometimes people just leave the food, which I think is gross, but also it's hilarious. Imagine you open that up and on the top is this unhinged note that says, "Hey, I bought these donuts for us to share, but I haven't heard from you and they were going stale. So I had to eat all of them. Sorry." And then it's got a gift card that says like, "Hey, get some donuts on me and then consider giving me a call. How about it?" And we've got somewhere in the ballpark. I've heard from probably about, outside of our system, 200 or 300 individual people that have told me that they've gone 1 for 1 on that touch, which is crazy, absolutely crazy. And then in our system, we run about a 90% success rate with like using it to close a deal. So, "Hey, I've been waiting for the DocuSign and was going to celebrate with you, but I ate all these," just simple ideas. But hopefully that gives your listeners some like really fun creativity to chew on and play with. We make, the secret is that there's 2 things I think that are super important if we want to change the world, which is our mission. We don't care about making people a ton of money. We want to see people's lives change. We want to see their family life change. We want to see their friendships change. We want to see them battle their addictions that they've been hiding in silence outwardly. We want to see them win on all fronts of life. And we ultimately believe that sales is the catalyst to these things in most cases, especially because salespeople are in such a unique position to basically become independently wealthy, no matter really where they're at. Even if people say, there's a cap on your commissions, I'll tell you right now, if you keep all the documentation of all the revenue you wrote, even if they didn't pay you, you take that to the competitor, I guarantee you could negotiate some pay to leave and go over there, right? But I digress. To change the world, there has to be, you got to give. And you've said it a few times on this interview, which I love hearing you say. Serving others is a huge component to us. So we tell people these ideas openly, and we hope people will just take it and run with it. But when people suck at it, we sell the tutorials for these things. They're cheap. They're easy for people to, it's a low barrier of entry, basically. And once you've tried it, like a crumpled up letter that you put in a trash can.
I'm buying your tutorials. Man, I love sales. I love helping people. 2 ideas just came to mind. So for Valentine's, I got my lady a card. And when you open the card, a big rose opens up, right? And it's just, it's paper mache. But I just thought, this is unique. And, I wanted to give her a flower that she could look at every day that doesn't rot. Right? You don't have to water. It's just there. And I just had 2 ideas because I'm currently creating a campaign in a new niche that I've identified as my ideal client profile, right? Using terminology. It's my ideal customer, right? Because we help field agent representatives simplify. We eliminate all of the data entry and literally for manufacturers, distributors, like cola companies, like we're helping one right now, a big cola company. They go out in the field and literally, instead of doing data entry and all of that, our field sales agent goes in and said, how's things going? You know, how's foot traffic? What's going on? And then, okay, we're just here to replenish. But now we hand them the phone and they just click on quantity of each picture and check out and done. And done. Get her done, son. Now, instead of visiting 40, 50 stores a day, they can do 60. But you know what came up with me? Just having this conversation with you, because you are such an amazing talent magnet and so curious, and you just put me in wonderland. So we're sending out all of these invitations and using giftology. And I know you know about giftology.
I was very good friends with him.
Yeah, I study giftology, and I literally yesterday was explaining how I gave a gift to one of our clients who had ghosted us, but little did we know we weren't being ghosted. The guy got laid off or fired, and he never elevated the sales machine to the organization, a big manufacturer. So I took my marketing girl, Bev, and I said, hey, Bev, you know what? Let's make 10 gifts, and I want you to go out and I want you to visit these 10 clients. She went in, she talked to the security guard and said, hey, where's, such and such? And he's toast. The quarterback is toast. And he said, June is in charge of all. Now June is in charge of everything. And she goes, okay, well, I'd just like to give him a gift. And he goes, I don't know. And she goes, well, anyway, I brought you some donuts. She gave the security guard some donuts. And he goes, that's so sweet. Let me call June. June came down. It was a sales machine mouse pad and a mug. $10. We served this company, but the deal was $100,000. And it's reoccurring revenue every year. Come on. And I'm solving their biggest problems, right? I'm making sales easy, the sales process. Eliminating admin, automating it all, and making the sales process easier. And this works unbelievably, because if we wouldn't have did that, and I had this training with my salespeople yesterday, I'm like, imagine if I didn't do that, if I didn't open my mind, because sales is mindset, skill set, and habits. What are you doing to get better at all of them? But I would throw in underneath that mindset and skill set is the ability to be curious and do something out of the box. So like what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a card and have people make these for me. And when you open it up, it's a ghost. And I'm going to send it out to all the clients who've ghosted me and say, hey, I noticed you ghosted me, man. What's going on? Come on, let's get on a call. And then I'm going to do another one it's going to open up, and it's just going to be a hollow silhouette of a man saying, hey, I noticed you have invisible man powers because I can never connect with you. You're like invisible. What do we got to do to get together? Do those meet Dale's, the Rebels seal of approval?
Those are fun for sure. I'll give you extra points though if you get the rep to wear a ghost costume to the literal office. Like walk right up, just like wearing the Casper costume, and like, hey, I just have this card for June. I'm leaving with her. Like just the whole Monty. That'll definitely get you in the record books with us for sure.
I love it. Okay. And not only do you teach this stuff, you implement it, you teach it in organizations. Have you had any of your clients or businesses come up with some amazing ones? And what were they? And what was the outcome?
Yeah. So the issue there is that a lot of people do have a lot of good ideas, but the problem is that in most cases, people are still sticking with the idea that they're doing this to get someone's attention so they can set a meeting about a product. And if we go back to the first principle that you and I just discussed early in this call, nobody cares as much as you. Well, why the hell would anybody care about if I sent somebody a TSR box, with like my symbols and logos all over it, why would they care? And so a lot of the time, even though we'll still hit because it'll be different, it's still, it puts you into that statistic of like 1 out of 20, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 5, whatever the case, instead of it just being like impact every single time. So there's one person though, there's one person ever that just figured it out. And I think what was amazing about this is that they made it so much about the customer, but still incorporated the personal brand. It was beautiful. It was art, to say the least. And they used the company Nothing Bundt Cakes. So they're bundt cakes, but they're called Nothing Bundt Cakes, which I think is hilarious. And so this rebel basically created, I mean, I was blown away by this. He's got it in our free Slack channel that we all hang out in and pass fun opportunities with, but he's got this completely empty bundt cake, right? With a picture of him eating the bundt, right? And basically saying, I've been stress eating, waiting to help you with winning MTSS this year. So like telling this person, right? I want to help you and I want you to win this thing. And I can do that for you, right? And then there's a gift card in there for, hey, get your own, since you're probably really bummed out that you don't have any in here. I think when people can take the principles and like our own ideas, but then elevate them in a way that, again, like builds the personal brand, helps the person who's receiving believe that you're here to help, creates a sense of wonder, and is just so just desperado radical, right? That there's like no way to ignore it is the idea inside
and the genius, because I wrote I'm writing my book, Next Level Sales. The genius there is he made it about them and them achieving their outcome. And that's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. Now I want to, like you say, regress and or go back, take a couple steps back, because when you speak and when everybody speaks, in sales, I listen to every single word because it's important, right? And you said earlier that, hey, it's all about making it about them and taking them essentially to the next level, right? And ultimately, when you work with companies, we talked about service and you talked about earlier educating the customer. That's specifically what you said. So I have 2 mentors and the first one was literally Zig Ziglar, when I learned how to make it not about me or my product or my service, right? But to be in service. And then my second mentor was the first guy I had on my podcast, the very first guy. His name is Chet Holmes. Have you heard Chet Holmes and the Ultimate Sales Machine?
Yeah. And his daughter's like out there pretty hardcore right now, right? Same Chet Holmes?
Yes. So yeah, his daughter's out there continuing his legacy. He wrote The Ultimate Sales Machine. I found him. I read his book, and then I had my lady find him because I'm like, I want this guy to mentor me with education-based marketing, right? Educating your audience of what's possible or disrupting what the status quo thinks and what can be done. So I did. So she reached out to him. I'm like, find him. I'm willing to pay this guy to be my mentor. And we found him, but he'd already passed away. And I'm like, oh no. So when I started this podcast, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start it in service. And my very first podcast is going to be a tribute to Chet Holmes and his life and his principles, because they taught me so much. So the first podcast, I didn't even have to have a guest. It's all a tribute to Chet Holmes. So and the reason I share that with you, Dale, because I love your brilliance and your ability to connect the dots and what I call cross-pollinate, because you can cross-pollinate these ideas to become a wonderland. And I'm talking about cross-pollinating offering. I read the Bible and I believe in scripture, and I believe in give and you shall receive. I believe in service, right? And so if you were to connect the dots between the service, or just like in the Bible, it tells you, give and you shall receive, right? I mean, hello, there's that. But then there's your methodology, Chet Holmes' methodology about education-based marketing, where I use that a lot as far as reaching out to companies, searching for best practices, giving them case studies of education-based marketing as a gift, even before I make an offer or do anything. And let's take those three elements of it. The Dale, the rebel genius of Wonderland, and I would expand on your brand, the Dale, the rebel genius of Wonderland in creating magical experiences for your customers and clients. Chet Holmes, the education-based marketing guy, and Giftology all together. How could you see those different methodologies working together to become a force multiplier? Or what I read about earlier this week, a guy talking about alloying, the art of combining metals to make a 10 times better product because you combine two elements. So let's do some alloying of those three concepts. And what do you think would be the outcome of what you could create?
Well, what would be created would be an unfair advantage, which is the Stu Heineck special, who's one of my sales mentors. And I love that term. You know, an unfair advantage is what all of us should be operating from. So John Ruhlin and I, it's funny, John Ruhlin actually wrote me an email in 2021, somewhere in that ballpark, like right after the pandemic. It was like, hey, could you introduce me to this person on LinkedIn? And I was like, what? Who? First off, I was like, I don't know you, dog. And then I was like, aren't you the author of this like famous book, you know, like Giftology? So it was a really funny first exchange where I was like, so are you the VA for John Ruhlin? Like, and did he pretend like he knew me? Like, so John, then he sends me a video and he's like, it's me and I'm sorry. And he explains why I was reaching out. We start a conversation and I mean, we were, you know, rest in peace to that man. I'm very upset for him and his family, or for his family mostly. He's, you know, on the other side in a better place, but it was sad to see that he passed away last year. And really the thing about that was that we were on the cusp of having him at Totality, which is our new annual in-person conference for all the rebels. And we were going to create an unfair advantage between Stu Heineck, who is the legend of contact marketing. They call it guerrilla marketing, basically. Yeah. John Ruhlin and me. And now I don't know Chet Holmes' work that well. Jeremiah Griffin, shout out to Jeremiah Griffin. He's one of the greatest salespeople I've ever met in my life. He's actually with my organization. He knows a little bit of Chet Holmes for sure and has, I don't know if he's been influenced by him as much, but has definitely spoken highly of him. And his daughter, I see what his daughter does. She like goes to like conferences and wears like giant signs and stuff. So I would just say that it would, you know, quite frankly, going back to my original statement, just create an unfair advantage. Because when you have people, like you said, you were talking about like Dale, the sales rebel, being creative and radically educating, like what radical education is as a, not just a statement, but also the meaning of it is that it basically proposes that you should learn not good or right or wrong, I should say. Okay. So you're learning, but not right and not wrong, but instead that you should be given the relevant knowledge, if you will, to help you identify what is right. So it's the concept of essentially like when you radically educate somebody, you don't try to tell them I'm the truth. What you're doing is you're actually exposing them and challenging the way that the narrative works or what the status quo would tell them. And because of that, it causes them to kind of step out of that comfort for a second, if you will, and make up their own mind about whether what's being presented to them is actually the truth in their own eyes or not. Instead of this whole identity and this idea that sales is a game of convincing people. So really it's nonsense in my mind because no, you can't convince me of crap, bro. And at 25, right? 23, 21, try to convince me of anything, right? And now that same stubborn kid is 39 now with all this sales experience and you're going to convince me? No way, buddy.
No
right?
way.
But
You're a rock star, dude.
But if you radically educate me, if you put me in a position where I'm essentially not being taught right or wrong, but being given the chance to choose for myself whether or not what's in front of me is the truth, right? I'm open to that. And every human comes inherently with a curiosity that can be piqued. All of us. Even people that are afraid of change, differentiation, something new. there is inherently a thing in you of curiosity, a dose of curiosity, we should say, that can be piqued no matter who you are. And if I can figure out how to pique that, God forbid, because then you're buying from me.
Amen. Last question. This is probably one of the most important questions out there for companies, for organizations, or individuals who need what you have. Dale, the Rebel of Wonderland. How can people connect with you, contact you, join your rebellion so that they can take their organization and, like you said, their lives to the next level?
That's an easy one, and I appreciate the opportunity to share. If you want to just Google Dale Dupree or Google the Sales Rebellion, you'll find our resources. We're either salesrebellion.com, and we have a free community on that website. You can also scroll to the bottom and request to prayer over things anonymously. So even if you just heard today and you thought there's something different about this guy and maybe he can help me, but I also would like to remain anonymous, you can do that with the Sales Rebellion. We don't need you to come and profess all your problems if you simply just want some prayer. But if you want to stick your name in the hat, we have a free community, but you have to apply for it. It can take a couple of days to get approved. You could get denied, but you can try. And go to our website. Literally, you'll find it. It's the refuge inside of there. And then if you're on social, I think that's the best way to really just learn about us. It's the best way to follow, the best way to consume, the best way to basically get that value proposition without having to pay a dime toward us or our organization. We give it all away. LinkedIn.com/IN/Copier Warrior. I still go by my original moniker from back in the day, or you can just type in Dale Dupree and you'll find me. You can do the same thing at Dale the Rebel or Dale Rebel Leader on social channels like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, wherever your little heart is content, or just type in my name. I've done a really good job with the SEO, and Dale Dupree is a very unique name, and I realized that early. So I've done a phenomenal job, as a matter of fact, to just type my name in and you'll find me real simply. And if you're I don't know, there's a few Dale Duprees in here. Trust me when I say, just look at the profile picture. You will literally not see another Dale Dupree quite like me out there. And I would invite anybody that's feeling a little saucy, wanting to learn servant leadership, wanting to be a part of a community that cares about them, come and join us. We're open to all shapes and sizes of people in the sales world.
Well, I'm joining. I hope I get accepted. Because I am joining. Amen and an amen to you, Dale. Anybody out there that wants to create wonderful experiences, Dale, you're a genius. I love what you do. I love how you do it, and I want to be a part of it. And I look forward to joining your community.
Excited to have you there.
That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com. Click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.